Learning sign language now is more important than ever, and this personal experience I'm about to share with you taught me why. Here's the thing though, this wasn't just like a light bulb moment that I had in ASL class. This is actually a personal story that a classmate of mine shared, and it almost moved me to tears. So where are we starting at here? I had a major crash out in March where I just didn't know what I was doing with my life career-wise. And at the suggestion of a friend, I decided to take ASL classes in the hope that I might potentially become an interpreter. Now, because this was a new, serious endeavor, I was going to approach this a lot differently than the way I approached my classes back when I was in college, where I was mostly just figuring things out, kind of flittering around until something made sense, which at the time was acting. But here I know exactly what I'm aiming for, so I'm approaching it with this kind of professional mindset where I want to do as well as possible in the class, not so that I can get a good grade, but so that I actually know the information, because an ASL interpreter has to be fluent in the language, and it doesn't take very long to become certified, but it takes a long time to get the actual training and reps in. So one of those avenues by which I wanted to improve was by joining the ASL club. And I'm not going to lie, the first meeting we had, I didn't feel like it was that serious, like we were going to get very much work done. It was essentially us introducing ourselves to each other as classmates and vaguely talking about the class, what things we were struggling with learning and what we were interested in improving. But like I said, it was just college kids kind of talking about themselves and hanging out, which that's totally fine. But I was thinking, for me and my desire to want to learn this as quickly and effectively as possible, this might have been a waste of time, and I was seriously considering not going back. But of course, right before the meeting ended, the student who basically organized the whole thing and got us together stood up and started telling us her story. So the reality of the situation is that she's not learning ASL because she has a family member who is deaf or hard of hearing, but she is actually losing her hearing herself. And this broke my heart to hear, not just because of how scary it is to potentially lose your hearing, but because she described being tired of getting yelled at. And I can think of some instances in my life when I was kind of impatient with someone because I had to repeat myself so they could hear me. And granted, I have gone through a lot in terms of learning more about mental health and physical health, and it stuck out to me how awful that must be for her to hear that from someone else, especially when there's nothing she can do about it. And the fact that she's taking this initiative to learn this entirely new language to compensate for the fact that she might not be able to hear anymore, and because she doesn't want to have to deal with that kind of treatment, I found it to be really moving. The other thing she mentioned is that the classes nowadays are incredibly small. In fact, there's a possibility that one of the later ASL classes I need in order to test for certification may actually be canceled just because there's not enough enrollment. And I found this kind of shocking because it's obviously a language that's super important in order to communicate in day-to-day life with someone who's deaf. And I was always under the impression that this was a widespread thing that many people knew. I know a lot of the students in my class are taking ASL as their GE, so there's definitely awareness about it. But I guess it's not to the degree where there are enough people who understand ASL in order to communicate with on a regular basis. And the last piece that I found incredibly touching is that her son struggles with mental health issues. And as someone who themselves struggles with mental health issues and has people in their life who struggles on a regular basis, and we all seek to find the tools necessary in order to improve our lot, that really resonated with me. The fact that someone feels ashamed for something they cannot help is just, it's so heartbreaking to me. And my classmate said that part of this journey of taking an ASL class is a way to prove to her son that he is not less than because he needs help or he needs accommodations. Which, with everything I just said, I have a ton of admiration for this woman, and I now approach going to club completely differently. In fact, I approach the class differently. It goes beyond this desire that I have to find a new career path, but really an opportunity to connect with a community that is seriously marginalized, that I had no real knowledge of prior. And the really cool part is, language in general. There are entire swaths of the world that you just can't talk to because you can't speak their language, and they don't speak English. So the fact that I'm now cultivating a skill that'll allow me to enjoy potential friendships with people who I otherwise never could have is just, it's phenomenal. And in some ways it inspires me to want to learn other languages. And if you're curious about learning a language yourself, I wholeheartedly encourage you to do so, because it's not just about, improving memory and brain health and these sorts of things. That's wonderful as well. But the interaction and the capability you have is so empowering. I could go on and on about this. The last thing I want to leave you with is I really began to appreciate my own ability to hear. I grew up loving listening to loud rock music, EDM, going to music festivals, all these sorts of things. And I approach life with the mindset that I want it to be like a crashed ship at the end of the day, right? If I go into my coffin, I want to be bruised and battered, because it means I spent my life doing exciting things. But I, going forward, want to approach it with a little bit more care and nuance, because there are people who've never had some of the physical abilities that I've had, and to take those for granted, I think is just doing a disservice. I think all of our attributes as people, whether it's mental or physical, are incredibly precious in their own way and should be utilized kind of in the way that I described a moment ago, but not to an extreme. Again, finding that nuance, I think, is the important message I want to drive home here. I do want to give one quick shout out to my cousin Liz. She just released a long form video on YouTube, which I'm super proud of her for. I know how difficult it is to make long form videos. And so I'm going to link her channel down below in the description. So keep going, cousin. I believe in you.